How many of you know about Google time? Have you ever read about that, heard about that? Raise your hands if you know what Google time is. Yeah, a number of you have. Good. Well, you know the idea then. Well, if you go to work for Google, you have permission to play on company time, the equivalent of a day a week, 20% time. Other companies have been doing it for years. 3M, the manufacturing company, gave their engineers Google time. And in fact, an engineer who was kind of fascinated with this glue that wouldn't quite stick came up with Post-it notes that we all use every single day. So Google time has tremendous value as a motivation and an engine of innovation. But what if we said to all of our young people, you're going to have a certain percentage of time in school to pursue your own interests, to ask your own questions, to be the architect of your own learning. Now, it doesn't have to be 20% time, maybe it's only 5% time initially. You know, I've been proposing this, and let me be clear, it's not free time. So students will have to sort of, in their digital portfolios, write about what they're planning and exploring. They could even begin by simply keeping a question journal where they write down the questions that are of most interest to them, and where we meet with them periodically and we ask them to circle the question that they keep coming back to as a starting point for their Google time. You know, a fifth grade teacher who heard me speak tried this and emailed me about what happened. She said she decided to tell her students about Google time and to no longer assign academic homework on the weekends. That the weekends were time for students to be architects of their own learning, provided they all came back on Monday and talked about what they had done on the weekend. Well, she was stunned by the results the first time she did this. One young lady who was of Chinese origin but knew nothing about Chinese history or culture spent the entire weekend researching about China. Another young person wanted to learn to cook, so spent the whole weekend experimenting with recipes from cookbooks and learning a lot about the chemistry of cooking. Another young person wanted to learn a musical instrument, never had a chance, spent the whole weekend on YouTube looking at lessons and began playing. She was stunned at the excitement that had been kind of exhibited and released by this opportunity. High school teacher recently emailed me. He'd given over Fridays to Google time. He said, you can do anything you want in this period so long as it involves reading and writing. Well, what stunned him was the reaction of his students when he first announced this. The kids in the front of the room, you know, the ones who always have their hands up and always getting the good grades, they kind of looked at him, they looked at each other. They had no idea what they wanted to do. And one said, aren't you going to tell us what to do? And the kids in the back of the room were kind of normally half engaged. They came alive with all kinds of things they were interested in doing. This teacher told me it had forced him to kind of rethink how he sees and evaluates his students. Well, I mention all of those as simply some starting points for what you might do in your classrooms. But I encourage you to also keep in mind this idea of play, passion, and purpose. How can we, as educators, as parents, as principals and as teachers, model the behaviors that we're talking about and bringing more responsible risk-taking, more trial and error, more play, passion, and purpose into our own work?